Hey Tarot friends, it's Tarot Tuesday again, and this week is Hermit Week. I've been building up to this for, 9 or 10 weeks now, covering off the different major arcana, going through the Fool's Journey, and in the Hermit card that we're going to explore today, we are looking at one of the core principles behind the philosophies and the epistemologies within tarot, within the Kabbalah, within numerology, within astrology, and within alchemy, those are the Hermetic principles. So when we come back, we're going to meet the Hermit. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm the Hermit. My name is Shannon Douglas. If you're just tuning into my channel, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to get up-to-date notifications. I run another series parallel to this one called Soul Mapping that I started a couple of weeks ago that I'm going to be running more regular content than once a week on. And this week on Soul Mapping and on Tarot Tuesdays, I'm going to cover the Hermetic discipline and Hermetic philosophy. And in tarot cards, the number 9 in numerology is the end of a major cycle, as I said, and we meet the Hermit. The Hermit is the fully individuated person, the person who's gone through all of the developmental processes and mastered each of the challenges of the cards as outlined of 1 through 8. But the Hermit gets to the point where we can close off boundary with the rest of the world. We become internally referenced. Now, if you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, Neo goes to see the Oracle. And above the door, at the Oracle, there is an inscription. I believe it's in Greek. And I don't know the Greek pronunciation, but in Latin, it's the same inscription that it resides above the door to the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, where the Delphic oracles shared fortune-telling and insights with travelers and kings and people of influence for many, many hundreds of years. And it's Gnothi Se Auton. It's 2 words, G-N-O-T-H-I. Se Auton means self-knowledge. So it's know thyself. And this is the Hermetic maxim that the principal one, at least in my mind, is that in order to understand the universe out there, we have to understand what's going on inside of us. Now, we know from modern psychology that we filter our experience of the world, we filter our interpretation of the world based on only what we know. And so that brings us to like fun sayings and funny sayings like, I know you are, but what am I? Like little child box games, right? Where sandbox games where children play with each other, and if you project something onto another person, they say, well, no, you are. President Trump's good at doing stuff like that. I know you are, but what am I? This is a way of recognizing that we project, our perception is our own projection. That's a phrase that's emerged in the last few decades that people come on commonly. Our projection is we can only project and perceive in the outside world the structures that we understand and perceive, whether consciously or unconsciously inside of us. Now, what are some of the archetypes that have to do with the Hermit that we know of very commonly? Well, Yoda, for example. We have in the Star Wars series, which is deeply mythological and symbolic. Yoda is symbolic of the forest hermit. Now we get a number of other historic sort of stereotypes. There's the hermit on the mountain. In lots of Asian traditions, the story is that someone seeking enlightenment, they hear whispers of this wise hermit, and they go through the forest or the swamp, and they climb the mountain to seek the guidance of the enlightened master. What's another one? Well, there's the swamp hermit, there's the cave hermit. So the story of Merlin and I think it was a crystal cave, or maybe that was Superman. Merlin's cave is symbolic of Merlin going deep into the earth, which is a feminine archetype, and being introspective. It's a yin energy being underground, and so Merlin had a cave, and that was his hermitage. And we get all kinds of hermitage stories from Christian traditions where people left the the monasteries and left their orders. And St. Francis of Assisi, for example, the patron saint of animals, was a forest hermit. And these individuals are all regarded as having some kind of power and insight that either required them or moved them to separate themselves from the world as it was. And we get this deep connection of the hermit with wisdom and mastery and a unique type of connection with God. Now, we can't talk about the hermit and these mystical figures without talking about where we get the name, where the name hermit comes from. And a hermit is associated with Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and Hermetic tradition. And I've talked about this a bit in soul mapping. The Hermetic texts are known as the Corpus Hermeticum, or the Asclepius. Asclepius was another figure historically who had Hermetic principles, and followed an archetype of deep study of medicine and retreat and self-knowledge. In fact, Asclepius figured out the Philosopher's Stone, according to legend, and figured out how to grant immortality. So these Hermetic principles are based on what we know of from the god Hermes. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my soul mapping video, but I just wanted to point to that because as the messenger of the gods, this function of our psyche helps us communicate within ourselves. Now, that may sound strange, and that's okay. Imagine a pink buffalo. Or actually, don't imagine a pink buffalo. What happened? The pink buffalo comes into the field of mind. Buffalo, long hair, bison type horns, pink. Where was that image? Where was that concept? Where was that thought for you before I raised the question? It didn't exist, right? Well, the idea of the messenger of the gods is that Hermes is a liminal spirit. It's a psychological, even neurological function within us. And when Hermes is known as the liminal spirit, the liminal is a threshold. It's a threshold of consciousness. So Hermes is associated with the bringer of ideas, the inventor of writing, or the bringing of language. So where does our language, as we're thinking and speaking off the cuff, as I'm doing now, where do those words come from? They come from a limen, or they come across a threshold into consciousness in the stream of our field of awareness. And that liminal threshold exists in our dreams as well. So Hermes, Mercury is associated with dreams, with ideas, with inspiration, with bringing up unconscious contents, with bringing it down superconscious contents and messages. And it's part of the internal wiring that we have, and that we've now researched really quite well in the field of neuroscience. And I'm going to talk about that more in the soul mapping video when we get to, I'm going to build a little bit up upon the axis mundi and the maps of the psyche that we have and how Mercury plays a role within those maps. Okay, so what are some of the other things associated with the hermit? One of them is that the hermit, or Hermes, is a trickster spirit. So there is widely caution about how you ask a question of the oracle. This is true in the Matrix, because the Matrix does trick Neo when she gives him his first message, and tells him he's not the one, when in fact he was. But if you read the way she phrased the question, it actually implied that there was more to what she was saying. So a famous example of the Oracle at Delphi is a warlord / king went to see the oracle before waging a campaign. And she said that, if you cross the river to attack your enemies, a great kingdom will fall. She didn't say which kingdom, right? This goes to what's known as the trickster genie. There's a problem. There's a pattern of rubbing the lamp and asking the genie for wishes, because the genie plays with your mind, plays with your question. And so it's extremely important when dealing with a genie or a trickster or your own internal messenger to ask the right questions and to phrase your questions carefully, because when we're talking about these Hermetic principles and the role that Hermes plays, the messenger of the gods, within the psyche, and it does play a role, and we all have it, and we're all engaged with it all day, every day. We just don't realize it. We don't have it trained, let's say. But that internal part of us, sometimes called a spirit guide, is always active, always listening, and if we put the wrong question to it or rephrase our goals wrong, it will give us what it thinks we want based on its own interpretation. So I will give you an example. I had a summer love. I think we all do when we're young kids, when we're teenagers. I think I just turned 19, graduated high school. Yeah, and I met a girl. She was from a city 3,000 kilometers away. I currently live in Ottawa, Canada. At the time, I was living in Vancouver. And strangely, and I arrived here in an unrelated way, but I met this lovely girl, and a big crush, and summer romance, and she was visiting for 6 weeks or so, and then she came back to Ottawa, and I went, and I was working in a warehouse, and I was doing very, very repetitive work for months and months, 4 or 5 hours a day, and in those moments of repetitive work, I started to create a fantasy, let's say, of being able to get to Ottawa, and I had just graduated high school. She was finishing her last year of high school, and I had this image of me arriving and having won the lottery, and these are boyhood fantasies. Having won the lottery and driving a convertible car and picking her up from school, and us driving off into the sunset. Well, forward about it would have been a decade, and in an unrelated way, I came to Ottawa. The mother of my kids is from here, and we came here to raise our family. And my oldest was in a daycare, and I had bumped into this woman after moving here and being here about a year and a half. I bumped into her in a work context, in my work context anyway. I was selling computers in retail at the time, and she came in, and she didn't know I was here, and it was a huge surprise. And it turns out she's a teacher. So forward a couple of years, and my son's in a daycare, and I go and I pick up my son from daycare, and the daycare center is right next to the school that she taught at. So here I was sitting outside the school, 3:30 in the afternoon. All the kids are letting out. I'm there to pick up my son, but here, this part of me, I couldn't believe that I'd spent so much time in imagining the future and setting intentions about being in a place, and that part of me figured out part of that formula to put me there 3,000 kilometers away, a decade later, end of the day, and not there to pick up her, obviously. But the brain, that spirit guide, that internal aspect of Hermes works in very, very strange ways. So when you get into this hermit magic, it is through introspection and understanding the structure of the psyche and being able to figure out ways of working with this internal ally and aligning ourselves in such a way that we can tap into some of the magic of the Hermetic discipline. Now, the magic of the Hermetic discipline is transforming lead into gold. And that's about transforming our lives from its leaden state into its gold state. I'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the Judgment card, because there's some really neat and interesting connections there. In any case, that's, as I see it, a whole bunch of stuff that ties to the Hermit card in the deck. This has been Tarot Tuesday. I'd love to get your feedback on this. Let me know in the comments if this was illuminating, if you've got stuff to add, if you've had similar experiences to that weird one that I had, where, like, you know, my dream or my goal or my fantasy wasn't quite fulfilled, or it was fulfilled in this really twisted way, just like rubbing, not twisted, unusual way, not quite lined up. Just like rubbing the lamp and asking the genie to make me a ham sandwich, and then, you know, being turned into 2 slices of you know, bread with pork in the middle. Those are the funny games that this trickster part of us plays, that Hermes plays, and it's also tied to the logos. That's the birth of the word, or the emergence of the word. I'll talk a bit about that. Actually, by the time you see this video, my other soul mapping video on Hermes is going to be up, and so you can probably, let me see, I put it on this side of the screen. You can probably link over there. My name is Shannon Douglas. This has been Tarot Tuesday. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the bell, like, and subscribe, and tune in next week as we make the move into or through the wheel, Rota, the Wheel of Fortune, and we pivot into the second cycle of the major arcana. My name is Shannon Douglas.